ReidConnect-Ed podcast, co-hosted by myself, educational therapist Alexis Reid, and my brother, licensed psychologist Dr. Gerald Reid. We're providing you with an expert and nuanced discussion on topics relevant to mental health, education, and sport and performance psychology.
Today's topic will be about sport and performance psychology. More specifically, we're going to be joined by two professors from Boston University who are experts in the field of sports psychology who have dedicated their professional efforts to understanding the psychology of performance through their research and practice. Additionally, we're going to have an open discussion about the vast research and theory that makes up the field of sport and performance psychology. While our Season 7 episode focused on the mental health of athletes, this episode will be geared towards the concepts, skills, and strategies that have been found to be beneficial for athletes in terms of their performance in their given sport. It should be noted that this discussion can easily transfer into other realms of performance, even outside of athletics, such as musical performances, public speaking, other forms of performing arts, and any performance-based tasks, including academics and education.
I'm super excited to have the three of you here together, and I'm just going to introduce one of our guests that are here today. Dr. Carly Block, Doc Block, is a lecturer in sports and performance psychology at Boston University Wheelock College of Education and Human Development, where she teaches and supervises graduate students in the counseling sports psychology program. She earned her doctorate in sports psychology from Florida State University and her master's degree in sports psychology from Miami University. Carly's research aligns with her theory to practice approach, focusing on developing evidence-based psychological interventions for specific populations in sport, such as goalkeepers and perfectionistic athletes, one of my favorite topics. She has co-authored manuscripts published in peer-reviewed journals and has presented at national and international conferences in the field of sports psychology. Carly is also a certified mental performance consultant through the Association for Applied Sports Psychology and has spent over the past 10 years working with athletes and performers. She has extensive experience consulting with collegiate, competitive youth, and professional athletes and performers at both the individual and team level. Through her applied work and private practice, she is passionate about helping clients improve self-awareness, enhance enjoyment and performance, and build life skills that extend beyond sport and performance settings.
Our next guest, Dr. Edson Filho, is an associate professor of sport, exercise, and performance psychology at Boston University, where he's also the director of the Performance Recovery and Optimization Pro Lab. Dr. Filho's research centers on performance optimization in individual and team settings. He studies the individual and shared zones of optimal functioning, as well as the relationship among team processes such as cohesion, team mental models, and collective efficacy. He's also interested in developing applied interventions for performance optimization and mental health for athletes and performance across domains. Dr. Filho is the author of over 100 manuscripts and book chapters, and he has edited 3 books on mental skills training in sport, research directions in the field, and sport psychophysiology. He is a certified mental performance consultant by the Association for Applied Sports Psychology and an established supervisor and established practitioner registered with the International Society of Sports Psychology. Dr. Filho is a chartered sport and exercise psychologist registered in the UK. He has worked as a consultant for professional, collegiate, and amateur athletes. His work on performance optimization has been funded by the Union of European Football Associations and the National Collegiate Athletic Association, the NCAA. He has been featured in media outlets including the BCC, Latin America, the Boston Globe, Nature Lindau, and Scientific America. We are so excited to talk about the field of sports psychology and all your expertise. This is a topic that I believe a lot of people are interested in, but if they're not really involved in athletics or have had the access or the opportunity to work with a sports psychology consultant or someone in the field, maybe it's a little bit of a mystery about what it really means to, be involved in the mental aspects of performance. So I'm excited for you to shed the light on this topic.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for the invitation.
I have to say too, part of the reason we have this podcast is to bring people in the field together who we have the privilege to know and to talk through things with, but we don't often have this opportunity to come together and talk like this. So I'm especially excited because you guys probably see each other at least a little bit more than I do at BU when you're on campus or through your shared students that you work with. But I'm really excited to jump in on this conversation too, because performance and motivation and engagement and how we protect ourselves mentally, I don't think really gets discussed enough, especially from an athletic performance side of things. Whereas you might hear in so many different media outlets about how we take care of our bodies physically. But I think this is just as important. So I'm really excited for us to have this conversation. And I have to just say, out of the gates, I know you guys are ready to pop off on this discussion, and I am too. But out of the gates, I'm going to put you both on the spot. Can we talk a little bit about the distinction of a sport and performance psychology-based consultant versus a sports psychologist and the differences in the field? Because I think there's also a lot of confusion around what the specific designation and the role really means and who might access that.
Alexis, I really appreciate you bringing that up because, yes, I feel like half my job is always having to explain the difference or say, yes, I know my degree's in sports psychology, but I'm not a sports psychologist. And so how I best explain it, and Edson, feel free to, continue off on what I'm saying, is, with my degree, my role, and my background, my goal is really helping athletes enhance their performance and also their enjoyment in their sport through the use of mental skills. And so I think where it's tricky and gets confusing, and what you talked a lot last week in athlete mental health on your podcast, is it is holistic. Like, you can't separate the athlete from the human, right? So things day to day are going to come up in their lives that are impacting their sport. Maybe their sport's impacting their outside life. But I think the biggest difference of separating is we're not licensed psychologists. So if I do have an athlete and that same athlete is struggling, like, it's not just my exam, I'm really dealing with more anxiety. There's a lot of family life happening, and it's not necessarily impacting their sport anymore, and it's more outside. That's when I would refer, right? So I think that's probably the big difference. And then especially too, like, more severe mental health issues like depression, general anxiety, suicide are things outside of our realm.
Eating disorders,
right? Like common things you're seeing with athletes. And so I think that's where it separates. It doesn't mean we're not knowledgeable or educational to know the signs and assess, but it's just not within our competencies to really treat. And that's where we think it's better fit if we would refer. So I don't know if I explained that well. I know I rambled a little bit, but.
No, I think that was perfect. And in fact, it's so similar to my work too, because educational therapy sounds like it's clinical, but it really isn't. So there's that distinction too that I'm constantly describing. So, how do we understand the differences between the two and educate people so they know really like who to consult with and how to get the process started. So thank you for that.
Yep. I mean, Dr. Block did a wonderful job explaining this. I think the key word to me is scope of practice. Do you understand the scope of practice, and can you explain that to your clients? And I think Dr. Block made a great differentiation between mental performance and mental health issues. So understanding that this falls within a continuum and everything's interconnected. But again, you want to work with the professional that has that expertise. One thing I would add is that we are in a very big world, and different countries have different regulations. So we have students from, we have international students. I'm a global citizen of the world, studying different countries. So understanding how that happens in the US or in the UK or in Australia or in Brazil, whatever it might be, is also important. So keep that in mind because, again, it's a global market, and sometimes you graduate from in Boston, but you might work in the UK. So having this understanding is very important.
Oh, really great point.
Perfectly said. So we're going to focus on the mental skills. We can kind of begin the conversation since you have expertise in this. Where did your interest in this topic come from? I think sometimes people have different ways of finding this field. I certainly didn't know about it until I knew about it. I'm like, oh, wow, that's like a field, so certainly something interesting to start off on. So what got you started? I know, I'll say real quick, Edson, I know you said that you grew up watching the Brazil soccer team and the football team. And I'm wondering if there's part of you that wanted them to play better.
Yes.
You were going to be part of the solution to that.
And that's why they're successful now.
Look, 100%. I always say when I give talks, and some people may have heard that before, I grew up playing soccer. That was a safe place for me. I felt so happy, and I was fascinated by being in flow, right? And sometimes I played up front. So that's 1 second before you score a goal that you knew it's going to be a goal already. It's over for the goalkeeper. I love that feeling. I love being in flow. And I think we want to be in flow. So that's what my research comes about.
Can you define what flow is for those of the listeners who don't know?
Flow, getting in the zone. There is other theories there. It's about peak performance experience, right? When you're feeling your best, you're feeling confident, you are present, full attention. There is an autotelic motivational experience that you're doing because you want to do it, not to make anybody happy, mama or papa, whoever it might be. So I love that feeling because, time flies by or it slows down. So I was fascinated by studying that. And a lot of things need to align for you to be there. You are not supposed to be in flow all the time. That's a misconception, right? That goes along with the perfectionism fallacy. But I'm interested in that. And again, many things have to align for you to be there. And I think that's what all comes from. But I started in sports psychology when I'm originally from Brazil. And in the first semester of undergrad class, a professor comes and talks about sports psych. And it was fascinating, right? And after that, I jumped into sports psych and I haven't left. So 2 points. I'm fascinated by flow. Good mentors are very important if you are to get into the field. You want to get well trained. And the other thing I like to say, when I started many years ago now, the field was called sports psychology. And now it's called sport, exercise, and performance psychology. You can look at APA Division 47, right? So first they thought, look, there is a specific challenge for sport. And then, that also applies to exercise. And now that also applies to performance broadly conceived. It might be the military, it might be performance artists, might be musicians. So it's exciting to see the field grow. And again, I think one of the goals of any consultant is to get people in those, healthy and peak performance experience states.
Could you imagine an athlete being in flow all the time?
Oh my God, I'd be a billionaire.
Well, that is a great question because, you want to get people as often as possible into flow experience, right? And when you get out of it, can you get back? I think that's, the ideal goal. But it is important to emphasize that from a neuro perspective, you're not supposed to always be there because you kind of silent your frontal cortex, right? You call neuroefficiency hypothesis, hyperfrontality hypothesis. So you need to use a prefrontal cortex to do stuff. But when you are in flow, you kind of go through the automatic experience. But what you want to do, you want to increase the functional performance of athletes so they can get in flow as much as possible. And I tell athletes, look, you can get it by the door, right? If you align all these things and eventually you enter, right? Because if you try to get in flow, you get out of it. But yeah.
Well, yeah, let's come back to flow. I want to kind of come back.
Definitely.
Don't
I feel like flow is kind of like what we're aiming for, and that everything we talk about perhaps is going to be kind of leading towards that in our discussion. So, Carly, tell us about your journey and your interest in this field.
Yeah, and I think, similarities, like what you said, Jerry, I didn't know what sports psychology was until I was in it. And so for me, similar to Edson and probably anyone in the field, I grew up as an athlete, huge sports fanatic, go Birds. And so it really came time my freshman year. Florida State had the exploratory major, which is a nice way of saying you don't know what you want to do with your life. And I knew I enjoyed psychology, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And so I Googled search sports and helping people. And that's when sports psychology popped up. I'm like, what is sports psychology?
Sports and helping people.
Yeah, I'm like, I like
That's
sports.
funny.
I like helping people. Can I make a job out of this? And that's when sports psychology popped up. So I went to the advisors in the psychology department and they said, we don't know what that is, but it looks like there is a sports psychology graduate program across the street here at Florida State. So I'm like, cool. So I went over, I talked to the program chair at the time, And I was like a little freshman, all excited, similar to what I'm hearing now all the time when I meet with prospective students. And I'm like, hi, I want to know what sports psychology is. And he goes to me, most people come into my office and they say they want to be the sports psychologist for the New York Knicks. Well, that's not going to happen. And I just thought I found my dream job. I'm like, I'm going to be the sports psych for the Philadelphia Eagles. This is so cool. But he said, just get involved and I think you'll be successful. And so that's exactly what I did. I got involved with the grad program. I took their classes, became a research assistant, and just fell in love with with the field. And so I think from there, it was just the education, the curiosity, which really led me to where I am today. And, I'm probably same with you and Edson, you can agree with this. Like I always was told like, you can't do what you want to do without a PhD. So I think that was always my goal and determination of getting to where I am and in the field is just continuing education to help others. And I think what's really cool with our field now, like growing, like Edson said, with performance psych and exercise psych. But what I'm also noticing when I'm doing these applications and interviews with our students, they're now saying the reason they want to get into the field is because they had a sports psych or a mental performance consultant, which, 10, 15 years ago, the reasons were very similar to what I was saying or what Edson was saying. And I think it just shows like even in the short period of time, our field is growing and growing, which is really cool. But
what a great point you just made that it's almost like they want to give back and that actually says how valuable this is for people and athletes that they've experienced it and they're like, wow, this is valuable for me. Just the fact that they want to give back shows how valuable it really is. Thank you for sharing that. And I love how you said you kind of just carved your path and you just, pursued what you were passionate about and things worked out.
I think that's the most important is passion. Like I'm sure we'll talk about that a lot today, but
I think that's so important. I want to put a little plug in because I talk to so many students all the time who are like, I've got my big 5 options of what I can do with the rest of my life. And I'm like, well, what else do you care about? Because even within, the medicine field, the law field, the business field, the psychology field, there's so much nuance and niche that you could potentially explore. And even within sports psychology, I'm sure we'll hear more about some of the specifics of teams and athletes you've worked with. But there's so many options available that, being curious, carving your own path. I mean, that's how Jerry and I ended up where we are, is we really developed our own programs for ourselves to gain the expertise that we needed to get to this. Well, I did, at least. Jerry had a more traditional path than I did, but really like carving your own path to figuring out what feels good. Because ultimately, I think, I feel this way. I think you both do too. We're so blessed and lucky to be able to do work that we really care about and we're so passionate about. And I think that can get lost in the mix of like working and striving for what comes next. So in the realm of performance and looking inward to figure out what makes the most sense for you, I think that's also a huge inspirational point from the both of you sharing your stories. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Cool. All right. So let's think about how we can provide some education about mental skills and performance. So if flow is kind of like an ideal state that athletes or performers can be in, you had mentioned that it's actually not realistic nor necessary to always be in flow. And you had mentioned, I just want to repeat because I think sometimes the listeners will say, I kind of need you to kind of repeat things that you're saying because we're learning so much. So you had said that when we're in flow, the prefrontal cortex, which is the part that Alexis helps students and learners to activate.
It's a great
and
plug.
use,
Thanks, guys.
Which is like planning, organization. Am I getting this right, Lex? Prioritizing, strategizing, right?
Those are all the behaviors related to it, for sure.
Right, which is the prefrontal cortex. You're saying when you're in flow, that part of your brain kind of just goes away because I'm going to guess you're going to tell me, right? Everything is more intuitive and just automatic in some ways. And too much thinking, too much conscious thought actually gets in the way of allowing your body to do what it can do naturally and trusting that. But you're saying it's actually important to, at times, use your executive functions because sport involves a lot of different aspects. So can you say more just about that as a theme first so we can kind of set the stage? Because there's so much that goes into performing. It's not just being in flow.
Yeah, I don't want to oversimplify, but there is 3 big words that we describe, when studying flow. Neuroefficiency, so your brain's kind of quiet. Neuroproficiency, you're using it a lot. And there is this idea of transient hypofrontality. So it's complex, like your brain's working a lot, but compared to when you are underperforming, it's in a little bit more quiet mode. So I want to make this distinction. But most importantly, it's because people get into that hero archetype that I always have to be perfect. I always have to be in flow. And that's very problematic. What we want is to increase the level of functionality. You're performing at a functional level. Can you go one step higher and can get one step higher? So that's very important because it's called the paradox of control. When you try to get in flow, when you try to be perfect, things happen the other way around. It's kind of ironic theory, right? They always say, don't think about the white bear, right? So it's for many reasons. So first, you don't need to be perfect all the time. Second, your brain was not, did not evolve for you to always be, in flow, and third, if you try to be perfect and in flow, you actually are more likely to get out of it. So I think it's all of those factors need to be considered. But if I can say one thing, I'm gonna repeat myself. This idea that we gotta be perfect and always in flow is not good. It actually gets you out of there. But the neuroscience is complex. There are many papers out there.
It is. Yeah. I was just going to add, especially with the work I do and the people I work with, they're constantly told to focus. You have to, put your full effort, work towards your potential. So they think that's the expectation, that I always need to be at this level. And I always tell them, I'm like, if I were functioning like that all the time, it would be so exhausting. And you wouldn't actually give yourself an opportunity to expand and grow in the experience because you're overly focused on doing things in such a way.
If I may, I think
Please.
The very important thing is to clarify your values, right? Why are you doing it for? You ask a lot of athletes, why are you doing it for? And they forgot, right? When you grow up playing, you're doing because you love it. So I think that's a first step. That's very helpful.
Here's kind of the irony of what we're talking about is that you're saying, if you get out of flow, right, you want to be able to kind of regulate yourself. That's kind of the things that you guys understand is we have to learn how to self-regulate. And you're saying if you're a perfectionist, it actually impedes your ability to self-regulate and kind of ride those waves, right? And the irony here is I think we're always kind of told, be confident. And on the other side of the spectrum, we're told, be vulnerable. I think it's a conflicting, two opposing messages that we get in the performance arts is what do you do with that? Can you be both at the same time? Yeah. But, and Carly, you're going to talk a lot about this. It's you need to learn how to be vulnerable so that when things don't work out the way that you want them to, you can stay grounded. And I think grounded is probably the best word for that, to be able to self-regulate. Because if you fall apart the moment things don't go well, as you're saying, it's going to be hard to kind of get back into that, whatever kind of state you want to get into.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's vulnerability and self-awareness too, right? And hand in hand, is it being vulnerable and self-awareness that brings confidence, or is confidence bringing that? And I think just going with the flow state and how the mental skills come in it is what I tell my students or clients when it's flow. Flow is that outcome, right? Almost like uncontrollable, just like perfectionism. I mean, a little bit different because we know we can get in flow state, but we can't become perfect. It's just not real. So it's exactly that. What are the tools? What is the process and skills you can set up for your success to hit that? And if you don't hit that, that's okay. But at least you have the self-awareness. You're vulnerable and open to that change and to that process to really obtain it. I always say, with flow, I picture it, think of a ladder and you see a door at the top and you want to get it. That's the flow state. And so how mental performance consultants or how athletes can get there is really focusing on things that are in their control, doing the mental skills, that focus, you said, but not to focus for flow, focus to be my best or the best I can be at the moment. And hopefully the flow comes with it. And what an added bonus. I don't know. I love how you phrased it, Edson, of just it's not always attainable. It's probably not always best. But what are we doing that's consistent, I think, is what can lead to it. But it shouldn't be the focus, or then it's what we're talking about.
And if I may, I tell my students, if anybody's listening, everything is connected, right? Goal setting is connected with motivation, which is connected with burnout, which is connecting with everything. If you really read the literature, everything is connected.
Can you explain that for the audience?
It's a classic Edson. I always hear it from my students. That's what Dr. Filho says. Everything's connected.
So everything is connected. Like, for instance, motivation is connected with burnout. If you're doing something you don't like, eventually you burn out. Goal setting is connected with motivation. If you have high quality goals, you have better motivation. Goal setting is connected with cohesion. If you don't have low level goals, you cannot get people together around those goals. So everything is connected. And I tell my students, you gotta read, and then read some more. So you understand these connections. But one connection I want to make is about the confidence piece, right? If you read Bandura, you got to read the guy. I mean, he has hundreds and thousands of citations. So the one of the most interesting things I learned is that confidence is task specific, right? We call self-efficacy. And it's a free thought to me. You might be very confident driving, but you're not confident cooking. You might be very confident presenting, but you're not confident, doing something else. And I think that's very important, right? I worked with somebody at some point. He would fly planes, those planes with 3 pilots. And, he'll get his schedule, 48 hours before. You're going to South Africa, you're going to Brazil. And he was confident he would fly this big thing over there, right? But if I brought him to the podcast, he wouldn't be as confident speaking. So I think it's a simple point, but it's an important point that we got to bring to athletes and performers all the time, right?
Can I take that a step further too? So even within your roles on a sports team or in your sport, if it's an individual sport, you're even pointing out like you can be confident in a particular task within the sport itself even. So it can even be boiled down to even further specific tasks that you could be confident or not confident about. And so confidence it's not a global feeling of like, oh, I'm just this confident. And I would say that people who act confident in terms of like everything about themselves and every task and everything they're doing, to me, that's kind of like an ego. That's almost like a false bravado trying to cover up the fact that they're not actually confident in a lot of certain things.
You also made a really great point that sometimes it's about going back to the skills, thinking about your levels of goals rather than just this ultimate attainment of, the highest performance. So thinking about, can we roll it back and actually look at the pieces of the rungs of the ladder rather than only looking at the door at the top? I think that's so important. Sorry, my educational executive function mind is like chunking it all out and being like, okay, because we talk about this all the time, that a lot of times lack of confidence or anxiety can come from a lack of skill, right? And it's really important to look at the bigger picture because, again, you could have the confidence in one aspect of a sport or anything you're performing at, but the bigger picture of what else you need to put that in play and context can be lacking or needs to be refined or needs to be expanded on. And I'd love to hear more about how you put that into play with the work you do with the people you work with.
Want me to take it? Right. I think that's the most common thing where you're seeing with athletes and performers. I don't trust myself. I don't believe in myself. Everything's linked to confidence. And I think, Alexis, you said it really well. Like, in order to get that outcome, where I always tell my clients, I'm like, that's great, you want to win the sport, but we actually have to get there. We have to walk up the ladder in order to be successful. So how do we focus on those skills? And I always, when I'm working with my athletes, come back actually. Good segue from Bandura's self-efficacy model or even Vili's sport confidence model is really understanding and breaking down the different sources that can lead to that confidence. And so I kind of picture that as the rings of the ladder, right? And it's like, okay, and actually with the skill set you mentioned, the number one source that gives us confidence is actually performance accomplishments. And I think that goes with skills, training, practice, the success. So we're not ignoring
doing the thing.
Yeah, doing the thing. So we're not ignoring the outcome. We bring it in to show like we can do this or we've done something similar. That's going to help. And that of just reflecting, maybe it's through visualization, conversation of what we've done is such an easy, simple way to reflect on being confident.
So that would be like a performer going into a game saying, I trust my practice. I prepared a lot. I've done this in practice. Therefore, I can do it in the game and holding on to that.
Yeah. And here's the example. Like in 2002, I scored the game-winning shot. And that can bring that, even, that didn't happen to me, but it's just like the smile. And so that's one way, right? And that's the thing, what's so nice with using the sources and actually taking the research to practice is I'll actually show and explain that there's different ways. Let's go through it. Where are your sources now? Another common one is those physiological, emotional experiences. So this goes a lot with eyes off that I know Edson will talk about later, I'm sure. What do we need to feel for our best? Do we need to feel calm? Do we need to feel energetic? And that looks different for everyone, right? Like maybe before this podcast, you all took a deep breath, but I was listening to music to pump myself up because that's what gets me feeling good. That's what brings me confidence. And so that's way of learning and building self-awareness, coming back earlier of how do we get up that ladder is, well, what do we need? What do we need to feel? What does confidence, feel in our body? What does it feel in our mind? And those actually go nice with the sources. The other one is that verbal persuasion, right? And that's just not like coaches giving feedback, but that's also yourself. What are you saying to yourself? So Jerry, like you said, right? Using self-talk as a way to build confidence, not just performance experiences, but what type of way do we need to talk to ourselves? And I can go on and on, explain every example with the sources. But I really think it comes back to the research and back to how do we apply it to build that confidence or build that skill set that will eventually help us go up that ladder to open that door and hopefully get flow. But I mean, it's still just a win if you're feeling so good about yourself and success.
That's great. I love the ladder analogy. If you look at the theory itself, there is 9 or 10 factors, 9 or 10 steps to it. But generally, I would say that everybody needs help. I've worked with people from different levels, people going to the biggest competitions out there, and they needed help as well. So the helps may look very different. There is different challenges, sometimes personal challenges, sometimes task challenges. The sport has a specific, challenge that has to be dealt with. Sometimes the environment, so all these factors interacting, but I think the one point I really want to drive is that everybody can use some help. Sometimes, you're beating yourself up. Your self-talk is not good. Sometimes, is that a relationship with the coach and the parents. The coach telling you one thing, your parents telling you another thing, you think something else. Sometimes you need space to debrief and reflect. So I think that's really important. And how, the ingredients or the mental skills that you might need might differ a little bit in terms of timing and what you need. But if you can get help, if you should. And that's another thing that, not everybody can access, a good sports psychology consultant, and it should be a discussion. One of the things that, I get philosophical, that I think it concerns me is that there is little funding for sports and music and arts compared to other areas, right? And what is it that brings us happiness, right? There is less kids exercising at schools. There is how, right, can we bring more support in terms of sports psychology and other topics to everybody out there? Because the big colleges, the big professional things have that support, but many of the youth athletes don't have it.
Yeah. And can I add something about the help part? I'm happy you bring that up, Edson, and maybe it's the difference when we came back earlier to the sports psychologist, mental performance consultant. I think help also expands when things are going well. That's the best time to seek that help, right? It ties nicely what we're talking is, well, why are you feeling confident? You just went through this flow state. Let's learn. This is the best time. And I think you see that difference. And of course, this goes like psychological, right? Like which umbrella, I think historically with psychology, it's always trying to treat the problem, right? And really, if we think positive psychology, how do we reach that optimal zone of functioning or that happiness? And I think that's where like the common myth of the idea of getting help is when something's wrong. So I think it's adding to that. It's like, and something right is also the best time to get help to be successful and perform. So, and I think that just goes how it's so important to fund these things so we can help. I think we have the people to do it.
Yeah, we got to highlight that 100%, right? Not only when things are going wrong, but also, how can you improve, right? Yeah. It's a mindset shift.
Yeah, absolutely.
You guys are speaking our language and I'm so excited. But also, Edson, when you were talking about, all the different voices and all the different ingredients, in my mind, I just saw a visual of just like an overwhelmed, clouded, loud, and noisy brain of the person who's receiving all of that information. What are my expectations? What is my role? what is important to me and why am I even pursuing this? Because I think everything gets so skewed together. And I was also imagining when you said the different ingredients, like, when you put too many ingredients together, it can get messy, it can get disgusting, it can get discouraging. And it's like, when you start something, especially with sports, a lot of the expectation and goals are, let's learn some skills, let's build teamwork, let's understand what brings you joy. And as athletes or performers get better and better, or they get older, I think all of that gets really disorganized and discombobulated. And it is so important to have these resources available, or even know that they're available, to be able to take the time to quiet the noise and to be able to have space to even explore who you are, why you care about it, and what to do next.
This is an excellent point, because there is so many things out there, right? And that speaks to the importance of, what I call proactive interventions, right? What are some of the things that you can front load, right? We're doing some of this work in the lab. We know athletes going to get injured, right? Should you talk about it before it happens? We know groups go through ups and downs. That's why I call it group dynamics. It's dynamic, right? So can you talk about cohesion before? So what are some of the things you got to front load? And that goes hand in hand with the notion of periodization of psychological skills training and periodization of sports training, right? But obviously, everybody's different. Every season is different. There are some things you need to react to, but we have to do both. We need to front load and be proactive. And then you also need to react to whatever challenges are presenting. And your point about, yes, there's so many ingredients out there. And again, you cannot mix everything. So when I study, group dynamics and high performing teams, there are some 4 or 5 key ingredients, right?
Yeah, tell us about that.
Cohesion, team mental models, collective efficacy, and coordination. Cohesion is why people come and stick together, right? Collective efficacy is the idea of we can do it and we'll do it, right? Coordination is being at the right place at the right time, doing the right thing. And team mental models is knowledge. So these are 4 ingredients, for instance, right? It doesn't cover the entire literature on social psychology, of course, but there's some of the things that successful teams have.
Like the foundation for
Exactly. And so when do you present these 4 ingredients for group dynamics interventions, or for individuals, when do you present that individual intervention? So this is important. And that's why you need to get people with expertise that are trained and that have the credentials that they have to have, and so on and so forth.
That's amazing. Yeah. I mean, it speaks to how intricate the field is and how you guys really try to understand the nuances of these things. You're describing the ingredients for a team. I'm thinking, as Carly's talking about, self-awareness and how there's so many different ways one performer can get to a flow state or get to their peak performance could look different for another athlete because everyone's so different, as you're saying. So Alexis, when you're using the ingredients metaphor, I'm thinking that like each athlete is almost like a different meal, right? With different ingredients, and like in a high performing team and a cohesive team is going to allow each meal to kind of come out the best it can come out because it's going to have different ingredients and you have a variety of different types of roles to take on. And when I say ingredients for an individual athlete, I think you're all making a great point. It takes a self-awareness to say the things that don't happen in a team environment happens in a one-on-one setting, which I really like. And sometimes it could happen in workshops, as you talked about, to help all the athletes reflect. But I absolutely love the opportunity for athletes to be like, wait, I can actually talk about what's going through my mind, because everything happens so fast. I mean, think about athletics now, and everything in life is fast, especially in athletics, right? Coaches have only so much time to get through their program, to get through what they're trying to do, their curriculum for, what they want to teach and what they want to, how they want to motivate, right? But that doesn't allow a lot of times for the athlete to be like, wait, what about me? What's going through my head? What am I feeling? What are my distractions? What are my goals? What are my motivations? How do I visualize myself doing what I want to do? I've worked with athletes too, with like, as you're saying, Alexis, like they're kind of confused about, should I make this decision or that decision? And even just any type of like confusion or dissonance in their brain could just, in that split second, stop them from being more natural in the flow of what they're doing. So I just love the fact that this field gives people the opportunity to really self-reflect and have an open, honest dialogue about learning, whether in the positives or the challenges.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think you said it so well. And I think it goes really nicely what you talked about last week. Well, whenever you recorded your athlete mental health session, is then it's on top of that, the context and the pressure. Like, how does that also impact it and impact these ingredients with the meal? And I think with how quick it is, and then all these added pressures, especially as youth athletes, right? Like now I feel like they're starting so early in order to get to college that I almost feel like sometimes their goals, and kind of coming to your point, is they're already set up from them. So it's not allowing them to actually think or process or know that they're supposed to, when they're being told by their parents or they're being told by coaches, like, this is what you have to do. And so I wonder, curious, like your all thought too, is like how that also is impacting like their choice to make decisions, or even their awareness to know of like, this is how it's supposed to be versus I am, where it's like, if you just can focus on that part of being self-aware, that's going to lead you to success. So I think that's also the biggest challenge for athletes and high performers, is just the context or the environment we're setting up for them.
I love the point about self-awareness, right? You need the self-awareness to self-regulate. There are team processes, but there are systemic issues, right? For instance, we know that student athletes, they get, 20 hours of practice a week. I think that's, but, I don't know how much time is devoted to the mental aspect of the game, right? Two things. One, research says that if coaches support the intervention works better. Psychosocial element, right? So can the coach says, look, you need to set time for your mental game. You need to go talk to the sports psychology consultant we have. That's one thing. But I also wonder about the broader systemic, right? Why out of these 20 hours, there is not 2 hours devoted to the mental aspect of the game, right? Or I don't know, should we talk about the systemic issue? Should we talk about the policy change? So there is the individual level of intervention, there is the group level of intervention, and there is systemic level of intervention. So I think we need to have this discussion. I don't have the answer, but I think part of the solution is now starting to talk about it. And athletes that come out and speak, against mental health stigma, or what Carly pointed out very nice, right? We can always improve our performance, not only when things are going wrong, right? I want to optimize my self-talk. I want to optimize my confidence. We need those voices at the individual level, and we need, systemic changes as well.
Do you know what's so interesting with that is actually a couple of weeks ago, Edson and I were in this all program director meeting, and a colleague brought up, and he's like, it's interesting, there's athletic trainers that are required to be on every team. Why is there not a mental performance consultant or a sports psychologist on every team?
For sure.
And it's like, how do we do better as a field to have that? And I think that just goes as a good example of, it's 2026, it is such an interesting point of why not? Like, why are we trying to advocate always like this is why we need it versus like, why is it not already within it? So yeah, just another interesting.
Well, thanks to you both for heading a program, to produce more people who can be doing this work.
Can I give you guys a soapbox for a minute / PSA? Because I see this in my educational work all the time, right? I'll often get pulled into a school or a district, and they're saying, we have so many mental health challenges in this school, and the kids are really struggling to be motivated and be engaged, and it's making a lot of complications. And, we have this social emotional learning program. We have these posters on the wall to talk about growth mindset, and we help them to be exposed to this, and a lot of educators and schools are doing great work, don't get me wrong, but I think this is the same thing we're talking about at a team level, right? We can say and point out some of the challenges that exist, but we're not always prioritizing from the beginning, like we talk about proactively putting in place these supports that are not just like a person in an office or a title or a role that exists, but something that's fully integrated into the work that's happening for these athletes as a team, as a school, as an organization, as a business, as a band. We could put this in so many different contexts, but through the context of sport, I think it's so important. And I really want you guys to talk to the audience for a moment, because I think this is so important for folks to hear what you see, you've been researching, and you teach others about the value and importance of understanding, the performance side, the mental skills training side of integrating this in as much as we integrate in, you got to go hit the gym and, do your reps and go through your physical fitness program. The mental fitness side of things, I think, is just as valuable, sometimes more.
Oh, yeah.
You were talking about injuries. We know that they're going to happen, but we don't really work on prevention or understanding of them, or
even knowing
how to notice when something
Yeah.
might be coming, or you're pushing yourself too hard.
Totally.
Both physically and mentally. So I'm going to give you guys this space for a moment. Let's all get on that soapbox for the audience so that we can really think about the promotion of this, not as like an add-on or a separate, but as an integration into the world of sport.
Yeah, I'm going to say a few things and I'm going to leave it up to you. But, and even as you're saying injuries, even like having a plan for how to support injured athletes. I mean, I see this in my practice. I'm sure you guys see it, is like when an athlete is injured, they struggle so much mentally. A lot of times because there's just it's like the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, and nobody knows how to help or support. The athlete doesn't know what to do. They have no role in the team, right? So even being proactive in that realm as well. But you're saying such a good point, Lex, is that how do we integrate sports psychology into the culture, into the system, into the process? And there's 3 quick things I'll say about that. One is it is a process. And I think we can all agree on that. So to think that you're going to have one workshop and everything's going to be great, and for the coach to understand, it's so important for the coach to be part of modeling an understanding of that it is a process. I mean, self-awareness doesn't happen like in 1 hour, right? Self-awareness is like a lifelong process.
Be awesome. Yeah, it's always growing.
Download that file and we're good.
Right, we're done here.
And as Edson's saying, everything is interrelated. And I would say self-awareness is collaborative.
Yeah.
When I work with my clients and
point.
patients, like it is collaborative. I spend a lot of time listening more than I do talking. There's a reason for that, because it's collaborative. I can only understand another person by allowing them to explore and talk openly and honestly, and listening to the themes and helping them. And then third, how to integrate this into teams. Coach John McCarthy on our podcast, who's another professor and colleague of ours, he said it himself, is like once the culture reinforces itself, that's when you have a culture.
Yeah.
When it's just the players are reinforcing the aspects and understanding and normalizing it, and then it becomes just normal.
That's my favorite thing, when the teammates start to provide the support instead of always looking for another. When the teammates start to embody it, it's so beautiful.
It really is. It's contagious. That's like that collective emotions come into play, because like they're all for this common goal and task working together.
Totally.
To your point about the process, I think it's a process that we always have to continue to push it. And I think the reason is, if you look at the history, the mental divide, the brain, the mind and the body, right? You can say, look, I have a knee pain, but you cannot say, look, I'm struggling with anxiety, right? And that comes from thousands and thousands of years ago, right? The mind and body divide. So that's one point. There is this stigma that we got to continue to push back. So that's one thing. The other thing I see is we really need interdisciplinarity in science and practice, right? We got to work within our scope of practice, but we also need to collaborate. And I think that's very important. Like sports psychology comes from research from sports science and psychology, right? So how we continue to collaborate. And some people talk about sports psychophysiology. We have a book about it, right? So, maybe the future is sports psychophysiology. So how we continue to collaborate in terms of interdisciplinarity in the science and in the practice. And the other thing, you need to have what you call psychological informed environments, SPI, right? When you talk about the culture, right? What are some of it's a science. There's people doing research and studying it. What are some of the elements? It might be goal setting. It might be task orientation. It might be how you relate to coach. It might be recovery stress balance so you don't burn out. You need to have people thinking about those environments in a psychological, scientific backed way.
Can I just say something about that? And I think it's so true. And a way of pointing that out for a coach too is, anytime you're giving an intervention, you want to understand the system first before you provide the intervention. So when you're saying it could be this, it could be that, like that takes time to identify like what is missing, what is the need in this system first, which takes time to, hopefully the sports psychology consultant and sports psychologist can collaborate with the coach and the players to understand first before trying to help.
Absolutely. That's what I'm always telling our students, right? It's triangulation of information. In order to conceptualize, we need information to know how to intervene. And so that goes talking to the coach, collaborate with them, learn their culture. That's crucial because that's going to navigate how you introduce it or why you need it. What are your observations? That's also important. What behavioral, observations are you seeing when they're working together? Are they all excited, like with the teammates? Are they against each other? How are you also learning maybe using assessments like questionnaires, right? To really get that information is crucial to actually do an effective job. And it also comes back then, like the importance of our field is the research, the theories, the frameworks that inform, that triangulation of assessment. So I think like that part, you're absolutely right, is you can't do the good work if you're not doing all of that first, that process.
All right, something I'm really curious about, because you've been steeped in this research and the theory for so long. What are some ideas or research findings or theories that really stand out to you as it relates to either team cohesion, teamwork, or just the performance of athletes and performers? Like what kind of things stand out? Like, these are really important. We found that this is important. It's to the test of time and the test of research.
I can start. I think one we already talked about, so I won't go into it, is Bandura. I think that one has really framed, right, the sport confidence model, and it just simplifies it so well of like what we need. Another big one that informs one of my research studies and one that really helps, I think, understand how the environment and the individual, and Alexis, I know your question earlier, right, like how do we really help or show the importance of mental performance is we're not robots, right? And there's this environment and individual, and Lazarus's transactional coping and stress model really talks, also to the audience, I'll explain a little bit about it. Is like, it really talks like, how do we cope or how do we navigate stress? And it's the idea of how we're appraising as humans, what the situation is in front of us. And so what that means, we go through this appraisal process. First, it's happening subconsciously. So we're not sitting there thinking, right? Like if there's a bear in front of us, we're not going through this like, oh, there's a bear. But we go through this 2-step process. One, like, is this important? Like, is this situation at hand showing me? And so the individual is going, yes, like if there's a bear in front of me, I'm going to die. And so then next, at the same time, we go through these demands and resources. What do we have at hand? What are we able to handle with this environment? And so it might be, right, like the demands are, I've never been in front of a bear. This bear looks hungry. The cubs are nearby. And we're seeing like, kind of think of it as a scale. Yeah. And maybe we don't have the resources. And so when our brain and the individual is seeing at hand, we may view that as a threat, right? So this is the Lazarus goes of like, are we approaching it as a challenge or a threat?
I love that. So repeat that, a challenge or a threat, how we perceive our situations and really emphasize that.
And I think it comes back. Yeah. So really with that, right, it comes back as individuals. What's our skill set? What's our ability to handle the situation at hand? And so that's where our brain is navigating, like, what are our demands and resources? Demands, right, are things that like the situation is throwing at us. And so if we're approaching it as a threat, it's more like they're outweighing our resources. We don't have that ability to fight a bear. We don't know. We've never been trained. We don't have the bear spray. And because of that, that elicits that stress. It's how we're perceiving it. Versus like maybe the other scale, we have the resources. I'm a bear tamer. I always carry my backup bear spray. I probably should have used a performance example. I think this is a very common one to explain it. And so again, that comes back with our skill set where, you know what, I have the tools and skills to handle this situation. This is a challenge. I think that goes nicely with that growth mindset, how we're approaching things. We know we can do it, or maybe we had a similar experience, and that might help reduce the stress experience. But I think what's really nice of why I love the series, it always comes back around, right? We're always learning from it. So, maybe we get attacked by the bear, and then when it comes back, it's a demand, but we learn and elicits coping skills, right? Like, how are we coping? Who are we going to? How are we reflecting? So that way we know when we're in this situation again. And so I know I'm going long explaining this model. That's to say I think it applies so nicely with what athletes and performers are dealing with each day. Our context environment's always changing. There's new situations, but how are we as mental performance consultants, our athletes gaining the awareness to know, like, how are we filling up more resources to help kind of tip that scale so we can perceive it as a challenge. So it's more like that positive way of taking it on. I can do it. This is a challenge. Let's go, right? Like stress could be a good thing if we're feeling it. And, I think that goes hand in hand with how we view emotions, how we repraise, right? Or reframe. And I think that's one of my favorite old studies. It's actually not a sport psych study. Brooks talks about how we like reappraise our anxiety as excitement. And it goes really nicely with this, that like maybe with the skills, our demands are outweighing our resources. But we go, do you know what? Like, I'm excited. I'm feeling this way. I'm not anxious. I'm excited. And we can see. So I know I'm going long into this, but I think that's one of my favorites in terms of like tested time, like Lazarus from like the 80s, 70s, where you're still seeing it applied. And it really takes into the real life account in sport and performance of the environment and the person. And those go hand in hand.
I love what you're saying. And it ties really well to the idea of focusing on the task as your motivation rather than your ego as the motivation. So that if you can see, this is the task, I'm taking on the challenge to approach this task. I'm not afraid of my ego being bruised or my, having my sense of self falling apart if I can't do this. It's more, I'm focused on the task at hand and I see it as a challenge. It kind of goes hand in hand with that really well.
Yeah.
And how important that is. And to kind of, in some ways it relates to flow, is that you're so absorbed in the task rather than thinking about who's watching me, who's going to judge me, what does this mean about my career, what does this mean about, like if I make a mistake, what's going to happen, right? So it kind of, as you're saying, all this stuff goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
Can I just tie this into education, because my brain is like exploding right now as you're saying all this, because I think behaviorism has actually gotten a really bad rap, especially in the educational realm, for a lot of really good reason. But I think there's so much to be gained from coming back to this idea of thinking about how affect and emotion can impact things. And from a series of behaviors, interactions, and experiences, we can actually learn how to better prepare ourselves. And from a universal design for learning perspective, UDL, for the educators out there listening, this is a big part of what we talk about in terms of the affective network of how our brain is feeling and assessing these demands. And even when we have the skills, we can link this back to athletics again too, even if we have the skills and we've performed in this way before, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to come directly online in the future. And this is some of that conflicting feeling that I think a lot of people and teams feel. Like, how could we have been this good before and now perform at this level that is just so subpar from what our expectations are? And how do we actually reconcile that and know what to do? So I'm gonna pitch this to you guys, because from the universal design for learning perspective, it's not just about fixing an individual. It's more about understanding the environment, like you said with Pi, right? The psychological influences in the environment. How do we actually set up and design the environment to best support these anticipated needs?
Yeah. A research talks about really building a resilient team, the importance of challenge and support. And I think that makes so much sense into this environment. And goes nicely, I guess, with what we're saying is, how are we building an environment where they are being challenged? They are learning on their own, growing on their own, right? Building that self-awareness. But how are we making sure we're giving them the support and feedback
the
to
continue? 100%.
Right.
So good.
Yeah. Thank you. What's
so good.
Feedback, so important.
So good.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yes.
And so I think that goes with it. How are we creating these in real life, right? We're going to keep it stagnant if we're not giving challenge. They're only getting feedback. How are people growing? But also if it's too challenging, that's where burnout leads, or less, lack of enjoyment or fear. So how are we making sure we're doing both to really set up someone for success? So that way, when a new challenge comes up, they have feedback, they have the resources, they can come back to it. And I think you said it really well when you're like, how do we not, it's not just physical, it's mental. I think you just gave that example right there of how important that mental side is, because it's up to the individual to navigate that environment.
And how feedback is given from a coach and how an athlete gives themselves feedback really matters. Yeah. You can give very accurate feedback, but if it's not received in an emotional way, if the emotions get in the way, if people feel a threat or feel like this is not, if they feel threatened by it for whatever reason, like that accurate feedback is not going to do anything. It's not going to be digested. It's not going to be integrated. And like at the end of the day, everything is feedback. I mean, we work with people sometimes they're like, you get no feedback sometimes. And it's like, well,
terrible feedback that doesn't actually make sense.
and then they doubt themselves because when you have someone who's in the position of power, like you rely on them because you're younger and you're kind of a, subordinate to someone in power who's supposed to have the answers, right? And coaches don't have all the answers and they're not supposed to. But like when I think sometimes athletes can, like if they don't have that accurate feedback that's couched in supportive environment, they can almost like gaslight themselves or feel badly and not trust themselves because they're like, they don't know what to think.
I'm going to give you guys a pitch too, because I think this is also the importance of your work and your expertise is you guys become the bridge of sometimes helping to translate what the coach's intentions are to the athlete, right? Because Coach Mack said this really well. He became a really great coach, he said, when he learned more about developmental psychology and positive psychology and understanding education. Because essentially coaching is about understanding people, teaching and learning. And for the work you all do, it's like you become that bridge to help to integrate a lot of these messages that sometimes can get convoluted or confused, it's sometimes unintentionally, right? We only know what we know. Right. So coaches and athletes, parents, educators, mentors, sometimes they're giving great advice, but not always at the right time, in the right way.
In the right context.
In the right context.
Right.
And feedback's crucial. By definition, you don't learn without feedback. There is, learning, that permanent change that happens. Sometimes you don't see it in behavior, but you see, in the brain. So there is a science on feedback, and I think people should study it. No, but to your question before, some topics that kind of resist at time or are still there. There are many, right? If you get a handbook of sports psych, there are many chapters. But I think two that I highlight. Leadership. I tell my students and everybody, look, you really got to study leadership. Not just read the abstract. You got to really study it. There is autocratic, democratic, transactional, authentic. There is so many different models. And I believe one person can make a big difference, right? One person in a leadership position, you hire the right person, that impacts the entire program. So leadership is a big one because it impacts all those key group processes, right? Impact the psychological informed environment. So that's one. The other one is transitions. You get injured, you move cities, you get deselected, you go to the Olympics, you go transitions up, right?
Yeah.
So you're always going through transitions. As long as you're living, there's ups and downs, right?
I think about this all the time.
Right? So you need to, there's this philosophy that I love that says, look, pain knocks on everybody's door, right? We're gonna face difficult transitions, and are we prepared for those? Can we prepare for those? And sometimes we can, and sometimes we overestimate our ability to bounce back. So we gotta be thinking about leadership, about preparing people for transitions. And one topic that comes often that I think is the most studied topic, which is anxiety, right? People get anxious, and in sports they get anxious because they care. Right? It's important. So one of the ways to deal with that is to prepare, right? You're anxious for a math test, you study, you feel better about it, right? You see some good athletes giving interviews. You had a really very good week, you're feeling confident, right? So preparation is important. But the other part of the equation is if you really care, you're going to be a little anxious, right? So how do we embrace that, right? People always say, pressure is a privilege and whatnot. But, I don't want to oversimplify. Anxiety comes from many places, but I think that's one topic you continue to see. That's one of the main things that people usually come to you for the first place. And then as everything's connected, you say, that's connected here and there, and you explore that. But if I could bet on three topics, I would say get good leaders. I used to work with this coach, and he said, look, you cannot make a mistake with your coaching staff, right? You have to hire the right people. And the second one, against the transitions piece, and then as long as if you're growing, you're putting yourself in those zone of proximal development, you're gonna have those anxious moments, and and how you move forward.
Those are the sweet spots, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And that's where we actually learn and we become better.
Yes.
And my clients and students, they call them Alexisms. One of my Alexisms is we can't always predict, but we could prepare. Right. And I think you're speaking so much to that. We can't always predict exactly what's going to happen, but we can do the preparation. We could do the work. We can have the practice that allows for us to do this. Again, practice physically and mentally. We need to do these visualization skills. So, Jerry, you might have something else on your mind, but I'm really curious as we're coming to a close on things. Can you share some of the techniques that you have found supportive and helpful? We've talked about them through the research on what helps to build team dynamics and cohesion. Can we talk a little bit more? I'm thinking in my head about my knowledge of sports psychology of like some of the mechanisms for change and support that you offer to some of the athletes that you work with, or you train the students that are in the program about.
Yeah. I'm happy to take it away. So one of my things I like to say, and you can steal it, everybody, is I have my 3 A's when I work with.
Wait, this is a Doc Block.
A Doc Blockism. Brought to you by Doc Block.
Yes,
no.
yes. Let's
right.
quote that.
So my 3 A's is first awareness, right? We have to build awareness. And so that comes like with my skills of questions, really using more of like that CBT approach of really understanding like when you have a good performance, what are things that are going well? What are you feeling? What are you thinking? Which most of the time they go, I don't know. Nothing's going through my head. What's happening? Like, let's really explore and build awareness of what's going well so we can understand the skill set or understand with my role what skills to include.
I would say too with the awareness is what are they not thinking about?
Exactly. Oh, I love that. What are you not thinking about? I'm going to steal that from you.
This is why we come together and talk about these things.
We're all going to steal the JRP version. And that's the same thing. Like, what about what's going poorly? And so with that of when I'm understanding, having them reflect to build that awareness moves into my acknowledgement stage. So right now, once they have that awareness, they're acknowledging, do they want to do something about it or not? So when they're in a game and let's say they have all this awareness that when I make a mistake, that's when I start going down this negative spiral. Like now my team, I'm letting them down, I'm getting worse. And then it affects their performance in return. That way they're now having the awareness to know they're going through that spiral and they have that choice. Do I want to do something or do I not? That's that change, right? And so it's up to them. And that's where that action states. They can do nothing, right? We're human. Like sometimes we don't have that ability to be aware all the time, especially when the environment's changing. Or maybe we do. And so that's where that action is. And that's where the mental skills. And I feel like it really just comes back, like we always say, the individual and their needs. But I can draw back from I love how you said it, Jerry, like self-awareness is a collaboration, is when I'm working with athletes, I can learn like, well, what are those skills? What's their mental toolbox that they already have? Like very strengths-based. I really love to learn because that's what's going to set them up for success. And so preparing them like with their pre-performance, my favorite is really those focus cues and behavioral things. Like when they're in the moment, my typical go-to is let's come up with like a finger tap. One of my research, like one of the goalie participants said they do this like finger switch, which they're flushing down the toilet. And that's the way like that they're already
triggering their brain.
Triggering, like let's do a reset. And so I feel like that's such a great way in the moment, but the work has already started with those 3 A's prior that they're trained to know. So that's always a good go-to common, like with my 3 A's. I think too is like the preparation, like how do we talk? We didn't even talk. I know we can do like another 5 hours with this. Self-talk is a huge one. I think that's also the one we see with research over time, the changes, realizing there's not one way, it's not positive and negative. It's what's best for you to talk to yourself. So learning those and then implementing it in to be successful. I can go on with so many different mental skills, but I feel like those are my go-to, but it really depends on my 3 A's that help me learn on what's best to help them. So if you're listening and come see me, but at the same time, I think for yourself, grow that awareness, learn what's helping you and what's hurting you, acknowledge like it's up to you to actually change it, right? Like what's in your control to actually switch it and then do that change. And that's how you're going to learn for next time to continue building that awareness.
I love the flushing.
Yeah, isn't that cute? I was like, I'm going to take that from you, participant.
Well, I'm picturing the Ted Lasso, thinking of the goldfish mentality.
Yep, that's also a go-to. You learn so much from TV shows.
I know. You really can adopt some of that.
Show.
But there's the science behind it. Yeah. I think that's the important message too. Yeah. That like these are great little mechanisms and tools, but a lot of what you all are doing and implementing is so research heavy and really science backed.
Well, I think to me is really the need assessment is very important, right? I want to understand, the whys and the whats and the whos. And from there is so many things that can develop. But understanding their goals, right? What they do with sports, because goal setting is connected with confidence. Yep. Dr. Block said before, those mastering experience, right? To set goals for that is in the definition of motivation, direction of effort, is in the definition of leadership, leading people towards a goal.
Can I just point this out real quick about what you're saying? When you're saying set goals, oftentimes, I want to see if you agree with this. Athletes are on a team and they think that their goal is just what their coach says the team goal is, but they don't set individual goals for themselves that allow them to get to where they want to be.
Or know how to.
Or how to.
I'm so happy you pointed. I know it's boring to discuss, goal setting. Everybody. I think athletes think it's boring, or coaches think it's boring. So thanks for the plugging. But it's very important, because a lot of self-regulation came from understanding your goals. That comes from understanding your values. But I think the broader point is understanding that need assessment. I think it's very important, and because I've done some research. Different sports have different performance challenges, right? For instance, like if you're running a marathon, hey, it's hard to run for all those hours, right? Or we study like jugglers, it's hard to practice alone, and you get burned out.
It's hard to run a marathon?
It's hard to run a marathon. It's hard to juggle.
It's coming up.
What are some of those specific challenges? I think it is important to understand. But I do want to echo what Dr. Block said about, the self-talk. I think the way you talk to yourself is very important. And one of the things that is important, sometimes you don't need to it's important that perhaps the inner critical voice, if you can turn it down a little bit, right? Because sometimes that voice is coming from other places, right? Can you be a little bit, more compassionate towards yourself? There is a lot of new research on self-compassion. So in short, that need assessment that inform those goals you understand. And I think the self-talk are important. And at the group level, you also got one of the most studied topics is cohesion for a reason, right? So, yes.
Teams that can work well together. What a beautiful thing that is when it happens.
Jer, how about you? Favorite technique or mental
Let's
stuff?
hear it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I want to just set the stage and say, let's normalize this, that even the best athletes go through exactly what you're saying. There's no athlete on earth ever who has not had to develop some sort of mental repertoire to deal with challenges and to do all the things we're talking about in their own way, right? So let's just normalize that everybody uses this and different people may not even think about it. So that's why we have people like ourselves to help, to help support it.
And also that, a lot of athletes especially use music as a way to get out of their heads. That's not the only thing.
Right.
Right. It's just a reminder that like you said, there's a repertoire of tools.
Right.
I work with so many people. I'm like, well, what helps? And they're like, well, I just blast my music. I'm like,
it's always music.
Awesome.
Right.
The
It is.
headphones.
That's great. And what else? I get a good night's
what else we
sleep.
got?
I eat good food. I'm like, okay, and
There we go.
I also just saw a news outlet interview about how wearing these headphones might actually be really bad for our ears.
I might ignore that.
My newly developed tinnitus.
I feel like every time an athlete's on TV pre-game in the locker room, they got those headphones in. So just maybe look into it a little bit.
Turn it down a bit.
Especially if it's loud, right?
Yeah, right.
Okay, but what else besides music? Because JRP is all about the musical aspect of getting in the mindset. But what else is helpful?
Well, I'm just going to make a quick joke. You mentioned the inner critic. I think we all have an inner critic. And one of my patients, he was talking about his inner critic. And we have a really good relationship. So this landed the right way. But we were kind of summarizing our session, because I always summarize our session. Like, what are your takeaways from today? And he said a few things. I said, yep, that's great. I go, you forgot one. He goes, what is it? I go, always listen to your inner critic. And he starts laughing. Because
wait, just to be clear, that was sarcasm.
Or maybe it wasn't. This is a new type of skill you got to tell me about.
Well, let me bring it together. Part of my job, and this comes from both the clinical and the sports psychology practice, is changing our relationship with our thoughts. I think a lot of times we have thoughts that go through our head. Some we're thinking consciously, some are just intrusive. They just pop in our head. But I think that as humans, we tend to think, well, it's in our head. It must mean something. Why else would it be in my head if it didn't mean something important? I have to make meaning out of it. And the reality is that like everybody has thoughts. Some thoughts don't even mean anything. They're just silly thoughts, or they're just kind of worries or whatever. And part of the training is like, well, not every thought that goes through your head is important. You don't have to prioritize it. You don't have to latch onto it or attach to it. This comes from kind of the mindfulness. So as you're saying, like it's so normal to have worries and emotions and anxiety. That's part of any type, as you said, Edson, because people care. And so the idea is to, you can allow thoughts to come and go in your mind. You don't have to latch onto them and refocus what you want to focus on. It doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean you're going to be like a Zen Buddhist monk, but it does mean that you can practice and get used to, not only in your sport, but in everyday life, practice noticing, I'm having like this random thought or this worry in my head. I don't need to keep thinking. I can just like let it go by and maybe not even fight against it. I think some people get so like, oh my God, I have this thought in my head. I got to get rid of it. And you fight against it, and it actually kind of makes it worse. Kind of like the elephant in the room. You keep thinking about it more and more and more. So that tends to be a pretty helpful technique for helping performers. And as you're saying, the music that I do, I got on stage for the first time. I'm like 41 years old. Like the first time I got on stage, I'm like, okay, I got to practice what I preach.
Yeah, right.
I can't get up there and just like fall apart.
Exactly.
So I did. And what I did for myself, at least, just an anecdote, I'm like, you know what? I love these songs that I wrote. I care about them deeply. I'm going to focus completely on just the song itself and embracing the song. I'm not going to think about what people think about it, because at the end of the day, I care about it. And that really helped me to be calm. And people were like, wow, how'd you stay so calm for the first time getting on stage? I'm like, well, I just focused on what I was doing, and just that's what mattered to me.
Yeah. That goes really well with the passion that we just talked about earlier, right? Like full circling, if we do it from passion and what excites us and means to us. I hear, especially the performance side too, it's like I'm making something beautiful, and it's my intention is to share it with the world, which it's always hard to do, but when you can do it, that's where.
I think I have the benefit of not doing that my whole life, where I might have been burnt out. And as you're saying, everything's related. So if it doesn't become a passion over time, maybe like the burnout could prevent that from happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Quickly, the burnout is a topic that's so important, right? And it can come from so many different places. And that's one of the things, I try to tell the students, look, it can come from so many different places, right? There is many theories of burnout out there, not only one, there's many.
Yeah, share some of that.
One is recovery stress balance, too much stress, poor recovery. The other one is entrapment. You feel entrapped, meaning, you want to leave that environment, but you feel you can't because you have the coach, you have a scholarship, your parents invested so much money.
Letting people down.
Yeah. There is the approach from motivation, self-determination theory, but there is so many other theories of motivation as well. But I think it's really important, that we discuss burnout for youth athletes in higher performing settings, because people, as Dr. Block was saying, they used to be passionate about something, and then all of a sudden, or sometimes over time, that disappears. And if you have those psychological informed environments, we can keep people in sports and music and arts, and not to be the best performers out there, but to keep living their passions.
To find joy.
Find joy. Yes.
Well, and to what you said at the end was so important. So important is that to get to the highest, like to become an Olympian or to get to the highest point, if you don't get there, it's not a failure, right? I think there's so much wrapped up in I have to get to this level. And if it's not, then it's all for nothing.
Yeah. And
I'm letting everyone down, right? And your last point is so important, is that like if we can have psychologically informed environments and supports, that the whole journey in of itself could be meaningful and feel more balanced. You're not just kind of like trying to get to the top of the mountain, and if you get there or you don't, it's like even people who make it to the top. By the way, Michael Jordan was being interviewed recently on CBS Sunday Morning because he just, I don't know, something about a racing team that he's involved in. And the Gail King, the interviewer, asked him, what's the cost of trying to be so darn competitive? Because like he's the most competitive person on earth, like in a scary way. It's kind of scary. And he said, and they both looked at each other, his race car driver or whoever it is, and himself. They're like, well, relationships.
Yeah.
They both admitted it, right? Like if you're that competitive, that fixated on being a winner all the time, it will take a toll on something. Yeah. And that's the best of the best. He's one of the best. And he admits it. It's like it takes a toll in relationships, and then what do you have? You get a trophy, and then what? You're not even satisfied with it.
Yeah.
So there's like 3 topics we're going to turn into other episodes and have you guys back to talk about burnout, thinking about the cost of being the best and performing at the highest level, because there is a cost to that too, as you said. And going back to the happiness longevity research, we can think about how relationships and connections are the number one thing that's come from so much research over so many years. And I think that's the beauty of team cohesion and working in sports and athletics, is we get to come together as a team as we are today.
If I may,
please,
I believe in sports so much. And I say that because, there is of course, sport is very problematic. There is, it can have burnout, there is trauma. But I think, we need to put the message that, sports to me, personally, that's how I got my job. That's how I met my wife. I traveled so many different countries. I was a little shy, but I played soccer. I made friendships. So, can we also emphasize that sports is a good thing? I hear so many people saying that sports is so bad. The more I study sport, the less I want to be involved with it. And I think, sport is so good. You cannot be naive about it. But you cannot be naive about sports. You cannot be naive about the real estate market or the food. You cannot be naive about anything. You got to use critical thinking skills, right? But I think it's an important message that, let's believe in sports. Let's have hope. It can be good, can be protective for kids. And of course, it has many negative things as well. But that's for everything in life.
So you just answered our final question that we ask everybody. What do you hope for in the future? And also please share, how folks can find you and something you're working on that they can learn more about your work.
Yeah. I mean, I think Edson said it really well, right? Like, how do we see the good in it? And you said it in the last episode too, of it's like its own language and culture in itself. But I think my hope is continue building awareness and knowledge. There are, how do we create the access to the resources? There's people out there. And I think my hope is that maybe what we heard from my colleague is that one day everyone will have a mental performance consultant or be aware of that. It's not just when something's going wrong, but something's going right. And I know not a whole other conversation, but we were talking about it yesterday. It's with research, right? We as researchers can only do as much as, our participants are willing to participate in. So how do we collaborate on that front as well? Tie the applied work back to research. And if I stole that from you, talk more, because it really stuck with me after we talked about it. And then to find me, you can find me on BU's website.
Boston University.
Boston University, sorry. But I also do have my own private practice where I'm still taking clients, specifically working on mental performance. I don't just work with athletes, actually. I also work with those in business. So if you're a CEO or, you just want to be better and perform and work, performance artists, right? Musicians, dancers, right? I'm also happy to talk more. You can email me. Do I put my email? Or
we'll link it in the bio for sure too.
Happy to work. I work virtually as well. So it doesn't have to be in Boston.
I do want to elevate, Carly's point. I was at a conference the other day and the keynote was saying, we need to do more research with underrepresented people, which is 100% true. But a lot of the young generation, they want to do the research. They want to study women in sports and international students. But it's hard to get the data, right? So can we also have people raising their hands? Look, I will participate in this study, because that's very important. Connected to that, I think I've been in sports science for, 20 plus years, too many years now. But, continue to see it as a science to practice, because that will open many doors. If you go to every Olympic team has a physician because there is science backing up. Look, they might have, a physical therapist because there is science backing up. Of course, in psychology, there is a lot of the relational component, which is a lot of the job. But can we also, there is many theories of motivation. There is many things that lead to confidence. I think if you have that, and how do we evaluate our work? I think that's going to say, we need that input, right? How that's going to look like, there is different, therapeutic alliance and working relationships, right? It might look different, if you go into the Olympics or if you work in a youth setting, but having that science to practice knowledge will open doors.
Beautifully said, both of you.
Well, thank you both so much. This has been such a joy. And most of all, thank you for your service in your professions and your careers. And like you're dedicated to helping people perform better and also just enjoy what they're doing more and feel more grounded while they do it. I don't, what's better than that? It's so important. And the students are very fortunate to have you, lead the program. It's such an amazing program, and they work their butts off. They sure do,
Oh, yes.
but they get so much out of it. And just so grateful to have you as colleagues. And this has been so amazing, and hopefully we'll do something else like this again.
I'm going to put one more plug in for the three of you at BU, because I've met a lot of your students and they just rave about all of you, and the work that they're doing is inspired by the passion, the joy, and the love that you put into the work that you do. So thank you all. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you for having us. And thank you for doing this podcast. I think it's so important and an awesome way to learn from an educational standpoint. So thank you both.
Thank you so much. Everything's connected. Thank you for connecting so many dots, right? So many dots
Hey,
connecting
it's the
here.
ReidConnect-Ed podcast.
Yes.
There we go.
Right person for this.
Yeah,
Thank
awesome.
you guys.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for tuning in to the ReidConnect-Ed podcast. Please remember that this is a podcast intended to educate and share ideas, but it is not a substitute for professional care that may be beneficial to you at different points of your life. If you are in need of support, please contact your primary care physician, local hospital, educational institution, or support staff at your place of employment to seek out referrals for what may be most helpful for you. Ideas shared here have been shaped by many years of training, incredible mentors, research, theory, evidence-based practices, and our work with individuals over the years, but it's not intended to represent opinions of those we work with or who we are affiliated with. The ReidConnect-Ed podcast is hosted by siblings Alexis Reid and Dr. Gerald Reid. Original music is written and recorded by Gerald Reid. The recording was done by Cybersound Studios. If you want to follow along on this journey with us, the ReidConnect-Ed podcast will be releasing new episodes every 2 weeks each season. So please subscribe for updates and notifications. Feel free to also follow us on Instagram at ReidConnect-Ed podcast. That's ReidConnect-Ed podcast, and Twitter at ReidConnect-Ed. We are grateful for you joining us and look forward to future episodes. In the meanwhile, be curious, be open, and be well.